pooped on my boyfriend's bed after I found out he was cheating on me, and I lit his car on fire. Disclaimers in my story time instead of me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I met in high school. He chased me for about 3 years. This man would tell me every single day that he was in love with me. This was before Instagram, so he would contact me every single day through Facebook. He would send me his favorite songs. He would write me poems. I mean, you can tell this guy was totally obsessed, right? After 4 years of this, I finally said yes to a date. And the only reason I kept saying no was because I knew somebody that had dated him, and they told me that he was crazy. I just didn't want to believe it because he seemed so perfect over Facebook. At the time, I was living in Manhattan, so I told him that I wanted the date to be in the city. So he took me to watch a show on Broadway. First off, I was really impressed that he could even afford the tickets because they were to a very expensive show. And before the show, he took me to a really nice dinner. And he proceeded to order everything on the menu. 5 appetizers, 4 main entrees, and a bunch of drinks. The bill came out to about $600. I offered to help him pay, but he said no, as he should. The entire date was really amazing. The only thing that I know now was a red flag is that he was kind of rude to the waiter. Of course, I didn't mention it. Fast forward a few months and he asked me to be his girlfriend. Now, to be honest, I was dating a few other guys at the time and they were all really great, but none of them wanted a serious relationship, and that's what I was looking for. So I finally said yes to my ex. Around that time, I started competing in pageants and I got very far. I went to Miss USA. Can you guess who I am? He loved this. Part 2 is up. I pooped on my boyfriend's bed after I found out he was cheating on me and lit his car on fire. Disclaimers in my story time instead of me on Instagram. After he asked me to be his girlfriend, I decided to start competing in pageants, and I got pretty far. I won my state and went on to Miss USA. At that point, my ex and I had been together for about a year. To my face, he always told me that he was so proud of me. He loved that I was so dedicated and disciplined. To get ready to compete, I would work out twice a day. I also had a bunch of classes and held down a full-time job. Here's when things start getting complicated. One night, our friends had a get-together at their house. Our entire friend group were there, and I invited my best friend. Now, my best friend has always had my back. He is my ride or die. Her and I went to the kitchen to get some drinks, and when she went back to where my boyfriend was standing, she overheard the conversation he was having with another friend. Apparently, my boyfriend was telling the other friend that I was crazy, that he thought I had eating disorders because I would work out so much, and that I thought I was better than everybody else because I was competing for Miss USA. My best friend ran over to the kitchen to tell me everything she heard. At first, I thought, are you sure he wasn't joking? She said no, he was completely serious. I was really hurt. Instead of waiting for the party to be over, I confronted him right then and there. Asked him if he was talking bad about me, and then he said no, of course not. And I told him the whole conversation that my best friend overheard. But I told him that I was the one that overheard the conversation. That's when he started gaslighting me. He said that I was overreacting, that I had completely twisted his words. I asked him exactly what he said, and he told me he couldn't remember. I asked him point blank if he felt envious of me, and he said no. He said, you have to get over yourself if you think you're that important. Part 3 is I pooped on my boyfriend's bed after I found out he was cheating on me and lit his car on fire. Disclaimers is not my story time instead of me on Instagram. After I caught him talking bad about me, he denied everything. And he also told me that I needed to get over myself. I grabbed my best friend and went home. That means my boyfriend stayed at the party by himself. Well, guess what he does? He goes out of his way to find a girl to hook up with. And I know this now because a few of my friends who were at the party saw everything go down. Apparently, after I left, he started scouting all the girls. He would go up to each one of them and talk to them. Finally, he went upstairs with one of them. I mean, he couldn't even go somewhere else. He had to do it in front of all of our friends. Multiple people watched this all happen, and most of them knew that we had gotten into a fight before. One of the girls that was at the party actually messaged me and told me that my boyfriend was in the bedroom with another girl. So I ran back to the party. He was already downstairs at that point, but I asked him if it was true. At this point, he had a lot to drink. That's when he starts word vomiting, telling me that he had hooked up with girls that were way better than I was, and that I was so consumed with my pageant competition and that I was too skinny. Then he just started listing all of the girls that he had slept with, and 2 of them were my friends who were at the party. What I did next is probably not the best idea, but I did it. I grabbed a bottle of alcohol and went outside with the lighter. I poured it all over his car and set it on fire. Then I got back into my car with my best friend and went to his apartment. And it just so happens that I needed to poop at the time. So I thought just to do it in his bed. So I squatted over his bed and did my business. Then he messaged me telling me that he was going to press charges on me for his car. Luckily, nobody told on me, so he had 0 proof. And luckily, his car was fine. A few months later, he messaged me apologizing. He said that I was the best thing that ever happened to him, but I ignored his messages. No, I didn't win Miss USA, but I'm proud of myself for what I did to him. Bye. Storytime about how I've never farted in front of my boyfriend and can't even poop if he's in my house, which led me to pooping in my car by mistake. Disclaimers not my storytime instead of me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for 3 months. We are so in love and we met through a dating app. He even moved into my apartment. I know some might say it's quick, but it's just meant to be. We are so in love. We get along super well. We're so attracted to each other. Our sexy time is like amazing, like the best I have ever had. And I was the one that asked him to move in with me and he said yes right away. I actually thought he was going to say no, but he was so down for it that I was so happy. Before he moved in, he actually would come over to my house all the time and he started farting in front of me. It was cute, funny, whatever. but I can't bring myself to doing it in front of him. I can't even poo when he's in my apartment, much less could I poo when I was at his. So I found myself having to hold it in all day long. Anytime we would go to a restaurant, I would try to go, but sometimes I just couldn't go because I knew that he was there. It's all become very complicated. Now that he moved into my place, we love watching movies. So we were sitting on the couch watching a movie, and suddenly I felt the urge to go to the bathroom. There was no way I was going to go poop while he was there. Out of nowhere, I jump up and tell him that I have to go out. I get in my car, part 2 is up. Story time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend or even poop when he's in the same place as me, which caused me to poo in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. Out of nowhere, I jump off the couch and tell him I have to go to the supermarket. He offers to go for me and I said no, but in hindsight, I should have said yeah, sure, you go, so that I could stay alone in the apartment by myself and go poo. I grab my keys and jump in the car, and then suddenly, I start pooping. I couldn't control myself. I couldn't believe it was happening right then and there. I stopped the car and pulled over and just pooped in my car. Luckily, I was wearing baggy pants, so you couldn't really notice it. Suddenly, I remembered I had an extra change of clothes in my car. I looked behind me and there it was, a pair of jeans. I take off my sweatpants and try to wipe myself as best as I could, and I actually went to a CVS, went into the bathroom, cleaned myself. I even bought baby wipes. Oh my god. I changed into the jeans and I got back in the car and went home. When I get home, my boyfriend says, "Did you just change?" Then I told him I ripped my pants somehow in the grocery store. And then he said, "You didn't bring anything back from the grocery store." And I didn't know what to say. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I can't fart in front of my boyfriend and this caused me to poop in my car by mistake. Disclaimer, is not my story time, I was on my Instagram. I told him that I had ripped my pants, so I changed into other pants. And then he asked, "But you didn't bring anything back from the supermarket." And I said, "Oh yeah, you're right." Then I told him that I went to CVS instead because I needed baby wipes, which I actually did buy them, so I showed them to him. But let's remember, I had just pooped on myself, so I really wanted to take a shower. So I tell him, "Hey babe, I'm actually gonna take a shower because I just got my period." Then he says, "But you just had your period last week." I just kept digging a bigger and bigger grave. Then he sits me down and says, "What's going on?" I just couldn't lie anymore. And I told him the truth, that I had pooped in the car because I didn't want to poop in the apartment because he was there. That's when he started laughing maniacally and told me that I was being so stupid. To this day, I still can't fart in front of my boyfriend. And I still can't go to the bathroom. I'm not sure how to fix this or how to even go about actually doing it for the first time, so maybe you guys have some ideas. Also, never going back to that CVS because I'm pretty sure I didn't put the pants in the trash and they were just lying on the floor and they saw me go in. What should I do? I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do about it. This story is wild, so hold on. My husband and I have been married for 2 years. We're best friends, so we've had a really good relationship. We got married after 6 months of meeting each other. During that whole time, I met a lot of his friends, including his best friend. But he told me he had another best friend who was going to be traveling for a full year. One day, my husband tells me that all his friends are getting together to greet their best friend, the one who had been traveling for a full year. We show up to the party, and it turns out that this best friend is a woman. Not just any woman, one that looks like she could model for Vogue. This woman was so good looking, I instantly got insecure. When her and my husband saw each other, they ran to each other's arms. Then I spent the entire night trying to be included in the conversation. Every time I would ask a question, she would answer it to my husband. She would never even look me in the face. Finally, I asked her if she had a problem and she said, "No, I'm sorry. I'm just really excited to see my best friend." When we got in the car, I told my husband I didn't like her. Then he said that he knew exactly what I was going to say. And he also said not to worry because I would never have to hang out with her. And that he would hang out with her without me, just to save me the trouble. Part 2 is up. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do. That's when he told me that he would hang out with his girl best friend without me, so that he could save me the trouble of having to see her face. Then I asked him if he thought that she was more attractive than me, and that if he preferred to be with her than with me. He started to laugh and said no, and he felt offended that I would even ask him. So basically, he didn't even answer my question. Sometimes he would tell me that he would go hang out with her at bars. I would stay home and just literally cry the entire time. I would get sick to my stomach picturing my husband hanging out with this Vogue model. That's when I reached out to my husband's best friend and asked him what the deal with her was. And this man spilled all the tea. He told me that they had all been best friends since college, and that the Vogue model was basically in love with my husband the entire time they were in college. But my husband never paid attention to her. But then he told me that they ended up hooking up one night, and that after that my husband was hooked. But then she didn't want to be with him. Instead, they decided to stay best friends. I ran to the bathroom and vomited. Part 3 is up. I cheated on my husband 14 times with his best friend and other guys, and now I don't know what to do. After finding out that my husband had hooked up with his girl best friend who was really attractive, I vomited. Even though this was before I had met him, something told me that she was probably still in love with him. That's when my husband's guy best friend who had just told me everything invited me over to his house. And then the idea just came to me. I'm gonna start hooking up with whoever I want if my husband's gonna be doing it with his best friend. So I went over to this guy's house, we had a few drinks, and I hooked up with him. Did I regret it? Absolutely not. I felt liberated. It's like I had gotten revenge on my husband. So after that, I went on a rampage. I tried to hook up with as many of his friends as possible. Exactly 6 guys. Then I looked for the guys that I liked in college, and I hooked up with a bunch of them too. In total, 14. This all happened in a month. But now my husband told me that his best friend, the girl that I thought he was hooking up with, is pregnant from another guy and that they're getting married. and that the whole time she was away traveling for a year, she was with this man. Now I feel like a total asshole. What should I do? Story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. Tell you that last month I made $60,000. Disclaimer is not my story time and send me on Instagram. So at the beginning I had to lie about my age. I'm really 36 years old, but I say I'm 22. I do look a lot younger than I am, and of course I get filler and Botox. I started my Instagram account 6 years ago. My inspirations were Anna Cherie, Amanda Lee, Sam Jojo, and Abigail Ratchford. I mean Abigail Ratchet. I basically copied all of these girls' pictures. Within a month of starting my Instagram account, I had 10,000 followers. And yes, all of them were males. But I didn't really start making money until 2018. You know, like every other girl on Instagram, I signed up for OF. And that's when I started making serious money. But I was also making money from Instagram. Brands would send me clothes and watches and protein powder, stuff like that. Eventually, I became an ambassador for one of the biggest Instagram clothing stores. I think we all know what I'm talking about. Fashion Hova, and I started making a lot of money then. So I basically started living above my means. I got myself a new apartment in Beverly Hills, and it was $6,000 a month. I also got myself a Mercedes, and I would exclusively shop at Air One. I would also go shopping at Rodeo Drive almost every day because I wanted the paparazzi to get pictures of me. And I even called the paparazzi on me a few times, so I had to pay them like $2,000 out of pocket. So yeah, I was spending a lot of money. Whatever money I got that month, I would literally spend it by the end. One month I spent $25,000 going out with friends. I would usually pick up the bill. This is what started getting me into trouble. Part 2 is story time about how I became an IG model / escort for billionaires. After I spent the $25,000 in 1 month, I decided I needed another income source. So I thought of escorting. One of my very good friends in LA was also an escort, and she told me about it, but I was like, I can't do that. But one day I called her and she told me everything. She gets contacted through Instagram by very, very rich men, like billionaires. I honestly didn't believe her at first, but then she showed me receipts. Her bank account had more than $1 million in it. She told me that she had only been doing it for 6 months. She put me in contact with several people and they had to verify a bunch of my stuff. But then after a week, I was finally in. I was really scared. I had to go get my passport renewed. This meant that I was going to be traveling internationally with men that I didn't know. A few days later, I get a message on Instagram from an account. The guy that owned this account was clearly very rich. It wasn't him contacting me, it was his assistant. He got my information and 2 days later, I was on a private plane. I landed in a foreign country and I spent the entire weekend with this guy. He didn't speak English. Basically took me around his city and showed me off for his friends. I honestly didn't feel uncomfortable at any point and he didn't try anything. In fact, he was actually super shy, but his friends on the other hand were really handsy. Part 3 is up. Story time about how I became an Instagram model / escort for billionaires. That's when his friends started getting really handsy. We were in a really expensive high-rise and the apartment was literally worth millions. And I knew that all of these guys were used to getting whatever they wanted. One of the friends actually grabbed my arm and told me to sit on his lap, but I told him I couldn't. He wasn't the one that hired me to be there, so I had to go straight to the guy that hired me. I told him that his friends were making me uncomfortable and he said, okay, we should leave then. I was actually shocked that he listened to what I wanted. Now one of my regular clients and I travel with him almost every 2 months. So let me tell you how much he paid me. For the 3-day weekend, I ended up with $50,000. Yep, that's right. But let me tell you a little about the dark side of this. A few jobs later, I ended up with somebody who was completely crazy. I ended up going to Vegas with this guy. He was approximately 10 years younger than me and was filthy rich. But he was also a complete psycho. He bought me this whole outfit that he wanted me to wear the entire night. I told him I was more comfortable in my clothes. I was wearing a Fendi dress. It looked great. That's when he said, no, you're gonna wear this. I ended up walking around Vegas in a micro mini skirt and a bikini top. By the end of this night, he was getting really aggressive. I tried to stay quiet, hoping that he would just forget that I was in his car. Suddenly, he turned to look at me and wanted me to do something. When I said no, he grabbed me by the hair and told me that he owned me for the night. Then he said, I'll add an extra $20,000 in there for you. And it does get worse. But now I learned to save my money. I no longer pay for my friends' drinks and food. I still have my $6,000 apartment and I upgraded my car. I live like a princess. I also bought my parents a house though. It was definitely one of the happiest days of my life. And believe it or not, I actually did end up finding love. My boyfriend is okay with my job, but he just asked me to be safe. Of course, he asked me every day to quit because he wants to support me, but he can't give me the life I've given myself. What should I do? Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I, female 25, have been married to my husband for 6 months. When we started dating, it was just casual. I never thought I would marry this man, but it happened. We had a pregnancy scare and that's when he told me that if I was pregnant that he would marry me. We took a few pregnancy tests and most of them came out positive. So we were convinced we were having a kid together. Of course, he asked me to marry him and not until 3 months later did we decide to go to the doctor. And as soon as we got to the doctor, they said, you're not pregnant. We couldn't believe it, but nonetheless, we were still married. He and I weren't exactly soulmates. When we started dating, we had a lot of fun together, but my friends would always make comments about him possibly being gay. I never took him seriously because he was interested in me, a woman. Sometimes my male friends would say, oh, he stares at me a lot, or that he would ask them to go out for drinks by themselves. I thought he was just trying to be nice and getting to know my friends. Obviously, I was wrong. My twin brother and I don't have a really close relationship. We had a falling out when he found out that I was pregnant. He thought I was ruining my life by having a kid, but it turns out I wasn't pregnant. So we started getting close again. He would come over to our house and spend a lot of time with my husband and I. But then I realized that they were doing naughty things together. Follow for part 2. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I would come home and find my twin brother on the couch with my husband. Of course, I just thought they were trying to get to know each other. I mean, we just got married and all. Got to the point where my brother was coming over to my place every single day. And my husband and him would hang out all day together. My husband works from home, so he's always there. I own my own business, so I'm usually not home before 3 p.m. Every time I would come home, my twin brother was already there. Actually, I told my twin brother he needed to give me and my new husband our privacy. That's when he said that I was overreacting and that he was just trying to get to know him. Then he said, "Are you jealous?" I looked him straight in the face and I said, "Why should I be jealous? You're my twin brother." Then he laughed, got up, and left my house. And just like that, I knew something was going on. In part 1, I told you guys about those friends that warned me about my husband being gay. I decided to call on my friends and ask them to tell me why they thought my husband might be gay. They gave me lists. And I started writing everything down. And everything started connecting. I'd come to the realization that I married a gay man and that he was possibly having an affair with my twin brother. I mean, could things get worse? I decided to confront my husband. What he told me literally shocked me. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my husband left me for my twin brother. I confronted my husband. He told me that my brother essentially had been following him around and wouldn't leave him alone. In other words, he was putting all the blame on my brother. But instead of believing him right away, I grilled him. Started asking him questions about his past, like why he had never had a relationship before me with another woman, why all of my friends, literally all of them, thought he was gay. Of course, he denied everything, so I got on the phone and called my brother. I asked him to come over really quick, and he did. And of course, I started interrogating him too. That's when I told my husband to repeat what he had told me. But he couldn't. He looked at my brother and said, "Sorry, I told her the truth." My brother said, "Which is?" And my husband says, "You won't leave me alone and that you've been harassing me." That's when my brother tried to swing at him. Then my brother spilled all the beans. He said that on my wedding night, my husband and him made out. And that after that, my brother would come to our house after I left every single morning to be with my husband and to do all the nasty things they wanted to do to each other. My brother told me that the one who started it was my husband. I looked at my husband and he couldn't deny anything. I divorced him the next day. My now ex is trying to convince my brother to be in a relationship with him, but he doesn't want to. And my dad is hunting my ex down. Bye. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her one bit. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's send me on Instagram. My boyfriend and I have been together for almost a year. When I met him, he already had a very big group of best friends. One of them was this girl. There's actually another girl in the group, but my boyfriend and this particular girl, let's call her Lacey. Lacey is completely obsessed with my boyfriend. I tell him all the time, but he doesn't want to listen to me. She goes out of her way to spend time with him, and she'll do girlfriend things for him. Sometimes she'll call him and say, "I cooked us dinner, come over to my apartment." She even goes to his apartment and helps him do laundry. Let me go back though. When we started dating, he asked me not to be uncomfortable and that him and her were only good friends. But as soon as I saw them with each other, it was visible that she was in love with him. When he first brought me around to meet his friends, she was super territorial. She would sit next to him and even sat on his lap in front of me. And this made my boyfriend uncomfortable. He asked her to sit on a chair instead of his lap. After that, I asked him if he had feelings for her and he said no. He said he's only ever seen her as a sister. That the thought of hooking up with her makes him want to vomit. Lacey reached out to me and asked me to have lunch with her. Throughout the whole lunch, all she talked about was my boyfriend, and how amazing he is, and how only a good girl deserves him. Part 2 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I don't trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I was sending me on Instagram. And her and I went to lunch. All she talked about was my boyfriend. That's when she started saying things like, "He only deserves a really good girl." That's when I was straight up with her. I told her that he had already chosen me because he loved me and that I didn't need her to tell me what my boyfriend needed. You guys should have seen the look on this girl's face. She was shocked that I would defend myself and even talk back to her. Then she said, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to make you feel bad." I told her that I didn't feel bad and that I knew what she was doing. She was basically trying to intimidate me and make me feel that I wasn't good enough for my boyfriend. She denied it and started apologizing. But at least I made it clear to her that I was not stupid and that she was not going to walk all over me like she probably did with all of his exes. By the way, one of his past girlfriends actually broke up with her because of this girl. I mean, Lacey. Found this out through one of the other friends. They told me that I needed to be careful with her. And that's why I was prepared to go to lunch with her. Guess what happened though? I called my boyfriend to say hi to him and that's when he starts yelling at me. He said Lacey called him to tell him that I had attacked her at lunch. That I basically threatened her. I explained to him what happened from my point of view, and he said that she was probably just overreacting. But it was her word against mine. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend is moving in with his girl best friend and I do not trust her. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. After Lacey told my boyfriend that I had attacked her and threatened her, he told me to keep my distance. So I did. But that meant that he would hang out with her without me. I found this completely unacceptable. That's when I told my boyfriend that she was manipulative, that she had clearly planned everything out so that he and her could be alone. Then I told him that his ex-girlfriend left him because of her. He told me that I didn't know the full story and that I should mind my own business. That's when I noticed that he wouldn't come over to my apartment every day. And guess Guess why? His best friend Lacey told him that she had a stalker and that she needed my boyfriend to stay over her house so that she could feel protected and safe. I just can't. I told him that she was clearly manipulating him and probably lying about the stalker situation so that he could spend more time with her. And just like that, 2 days later, he told me that they were moving in together and that she miraculously found an apartment big enough for the two of them. In 2 days? I don't think so. I think she had been planning this the whole time, and my boyfriend is just stupid enough to fall for it. I told him if he moved in with her that he should just forget about me. He begged me not to leave him, so I guess I'm still his girlfriend. He's still debating whether or not to move in with her. He says he doesn't want to lose me, but he wants to be able to be there for her. I think I should break up with him, but maybe there's another solution. What do you guys think I should do? Story time about how I kissed every teacher I ever had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. Growing up, I was a spoiled brat. My parents gave me literally everything I ever wanted. For my 15th birthday, I told my dad that if he didn't get me a BMW, I would run away. So on my 15th birthday, I got the BMW. My parents never said no to anything. One time I told my parents I wanted to have a party at my house and they said no. I threw a tantrum and started to cry. My dad pulled out his credit card and told me to stop crying and I could go buy whatever I wanted. And I pretty much maxed out his card. He did punish me for a month, but all he really took away was the TV. As you can see, I was completely entitled. And yes, looking back, I would love to punch myself. I was a complete brat. When I got into high school, I went boy crazy. My parents told me they did not want me having boyfriends, but of course, I put up a fight. And they had no choice but to let me have boyfriends. I would bring them over to my house all the time, and I would always take them up to my room and lock our door. My dad told me one time to open the door, and I wouldn't, so he just left me. Eventually, I got bored with all my boyfriends, so I would just break up with them. But one day, this new high school teacher comes in. We made eye contact for about 5 seconds. I was obsessed. Follow for part 2. Story time about how I kissed every high school teacher I had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, it's not my story time, it's on Instagram. After we locked eyes for about 5 seconds, he looked away. But I was totally obsessed. He was like the most perfect guy I'd ever seen. And the first thing I did was go to his classroom. I knocked on the door and as soon as he saw me, he smiled and said, "Come in." We talked for about 2 minutes and he told me that he was only substituting. So I knew I needed to make my move really quick. Fortunately, I was not taking the classes that he was substituting, but I had to find a way to get close to him. So I started watching everything that he did. My school had a big outdoors area and there were lots of tables around. And I noticed that he would go behind the library to eat his lunch. So I started going behind the library to eat my lunch. I decided to get there before he did so that it would be a coincidence. As soon as he saw me, he waved, but he sat at another table. So I grabbed my food and went over to sit with him. That's when I started asking him if he had a girlfriend. He got super red. This guy was blushing. And I knew right away that he probably had a crush on me. He basically didn't give me a yes or a no about the girlfriend, but I didn't care. But I didn't want to make my move right away. I said for the next 3 days I sat with him at lunch. Finally, he asked me, "Don't you have friends?" And I said yes, but they're all annoying. That's when I leaned in for the kiss. And no, he did not pull away. The kiss lasted for about 10 seconds. As soon as we pull away, he starts looking around to see if anybody saw. And he told me that I need to find someone my own age. By the way, he was 24, I was 17. Next day at lunch, I asked him if he wanted to go to my car. And we ended up kissing 3 more times that day. That's when he asked me for my phone number. Follow for part 3. Story time about how I kissed every teacher I had a crush on and never got caught. Disclaimer, this is not my story time, it's on Instagram. As we were sitting in my car kissing, he asked me for my number. Gave him my number and that's when he said that because he's only a substitute teacher, we could still hang out outside of school. And I said, of course. The following week, he was gone because the teacher he was substituting for was back. No, he never called me. A few months later, we had another substitute teacher. And this guy was also really good looking. He wasn't as good looking as the first one, but good enough to distract me. This time I got lucky. He was substituting for drama. And I took drama twice a week. So I knew that I was going to be seeing him often. First thing I needed to do was get him to notice me. But this took a lot longer than the other guy. For the first week, I would just try to talk to him, but he was not having it. He would literally tell me to just go sit down. But I couldn't give up. One day after class, I decided to stay late. I knew that he would be staying late as well, so I knew that was my in. I went up to him and asked him if I could help him out. He said yes, and he basically told me to put away some of the costuming. As we were doing that, I just started talking to him. And I swear to God, for a minute, this guy forgot that I was a student. We started talking about everything. By the end of the conversation, he told me that I was really mature. And that I made him laugh. So the next day I stayed after school with him again. This time we were backstage organizing props. And we were completely isolated. That's when I told him that I thought he was really cute and that he was probably a good kisser. Then he walks up to me and kisses me. Oh my God, the butterflies in my stomach. When he stopped kissing me, I pulled him in and kissed him again. That's when he came to his senses and told me that I needed to go home. So I did. And the following week he was not there. Apparently he had a family emergency, but we know it's a lie. Looking back on my behavior, I'm totally horrified. Where did I get the courage to do all the things I did? I never spoke to any of them again, but I did did see one of them on Instagram. I did not follow him. He's now got a big beer belly. Ew. Definitely don't do what I did. If I could go back, I would not have done it. Bye. I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I met a little over a year ago. We actually met on vacation and we happened to live in the same city, so we decided to go on a date when we got back. 2 months later, we got engaged. My family was completely against it though. My parents thought it was way too quick for us to get married. But here's the thing, I'm 32 and I was desperate at that point for somebody to just ask me to marry them. And looking back, that was completely wrong of me. My parents were so against it that when they met my husband, who was my boyfriend at the time, they told him that we should just date a little bit longer before we even decided to get engaged. But of course, eventually we made the decision on our own and my parents just had to deal with it. By the time we had gotten engaged, I had only met his mom. His dad traveled a lot for work, so he was pretty much never home. So here's a little backstory on my husband. He was born in the same city I was, and his parents had him when they were 14 and 15. They were incredibly young. So his parents were more like his friends. They had so much fun and hung out together. It was always a really good time. We decided to have an engagement party, and that's when I met his dad. And it was infatuation at first sight. Part 2 is up. I'm attracted to my father-in-law and I kind of want to hook up with him. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I decided to start flirting with him a little bit more. I kind of wanted to see what he would say. My parents-in-law invited me and my husband over to their house for barbecue. So I decided to wear a thong bikini. My father-in-law was grilling in the backyard and my mother-in-law was inside making a salad. So of course, I took off all my clothes and I pranced around the pool in my thong bikini. I positioned myself perfectly so that my father-in-law had a great view of my ass. I also went up to him and started talking. I would touch his shoulder every now and then. That's when he said, if I didn't know any better, I would think that you're flirting with me. Then he smiled. I almost died. I laughed with him too. And then my stupid husband came outside. That was 2 days ago. You guys tell me, but in my opinion, it sounded like he was liking it. For the rest of the barbecue, every time I would turn to look at him, he was always looking at me, so I knew it was working. But now I'm like, what's the goal? Do I really want to ruin my relationship with my husband and ruin his parents' relationship? Or do you think we can keep it on the down low? What should I do? Story time about how I found my husband's secret phone. Disclaimer, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I found 5 dating apps and 2 secret girlfriends on his phone. And I can't even begin to tell you what I found on Instagram. Up until this point, my husband and I had the utmost respect and trust for each other. I never once thought he was capable of doing this. Literally every woman says that when they find out their man is cheating. Around 6 months ago, my husband started a new job. He's in tech and makes a lot of money, so I've been able to stay at home with our kids. We now have 2 kids and they're both 2 and 5. Our life is amazing. Our parents live near us. We always make time for each other and go out on dates. We even take solo trips on the weekends. Last year we went to Bali for 2 weeks. My point is, we always make time for each other. When he started his new job, he started earning more money, but this also meant that he took on a lot more work. He was always so stressed out. My husband and I met in college and we studied the exact same thing. We both worked for the same company. Eventually I retired to take care of our kids. So when he got his new job, I offered to help him out with his work. He was actually really grateful for this and we were both doing a really good job. He was working from home 3 days out of the week. So it was a great situation. We were spending time together, working together, and the kids were spending more time with their dad. His new job gave him a new cell phone, and this is the cell phone that I would usually use to help him out with his work and his laptop. Part 2 is up. Story time about how I found my husband's secret cell phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers, is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. I started using his work cell phone to help him out with his job, and he kept his own cell phone. This is when I started noticing that he would make a big deal about losing his phone. Anytime he would misplace it, he would go absolutely berserk. Now, I thought it was just because he was stressed about work, till I realized it wasn't stress. He forgot to silence his phone one night, and the notifications were going off. I woke him up and asked him to turn it off. My mind did not go to him cheating. I thought it was work-related stuff. Then I realized it was his personal phone that was going off, not his work phone. The next day, he apologized for having his work notifications on, and I said, but it wasn't your work phone, it was your personal phone. And he said, no, it wasn't. And I said, yes, it was. And that's when he accused me of being paranoid and crazy. And that's when I knew he was cheating. I had to keep it cool though. I was feeding the kids in the kitchen when this all happened. On this day, he was gonna go to work. I knew that he was gonna take his personal and his work phone with him to the office. So what I did was change the phone covers on each phone and flip them upside down. He grabbed the work phone thinking it was his personal phone. He put it in his pocket and went to the bathroom. And he left his work phone, which was his personal phone, on the countertop. I told him that maybe I should keep it just in case I needed to answer emails, and he said yes. He left and I had his phone all to myself. As soon as I opened his personal phone, I went straight to the messages and I found his 2 girlfriends, Laura and Missy. Part 3 is Story time about how I found my husband's secret phone, his 2 girlfriends, and his 5 dating apps. Disclaimers and on my story time instead of me on Instagram. I started reading through the text messages between his 2 girlfriends. I scrolled and scrolled and scrolled. He had been together with the first girl for 2 months and the second girl just for 3 weeks. And in the messages, he was totally bad-mouthing me. He was telling them that I was crazy and abusive. And that's how he justified his cheating to them. I also read in some of the messages that he was complaining about our kids, how spoiled and ungrateful my kids were, and that's why he wanted to escape the house to be with them. Let me tell you, our kids are so considerate and so loving towards us. They're very affectionate children, and they never get upset at their dad whenever he has to go to work. So for him to be talking badly about our children just made everything 10 times worse. After reading the messages for about 2 or 3 minutes, I went to the bathroom and vomited. I was physically ill. His messages were so perverted too. I know that when you start a new relationship, you're always trying to impress people, but he just took it too far. After I vomited, I went back to his phone and kept reading the messages. This is when I found out that he was paying both of these girls rents. So the whole time I'm helping him with his job to earn money for our family, half of that was going to these women. I got sick again. After I calmed down for a few minutes, I went back to his phone. Then I found his dating apps. His dating profile was so disgusting too. He was all about fitness and mental health. He also claimed that he was single in his dating profiles. So on top of him cheating on me, he was cheating on his 2 girlfriends. This time I didn't bother reading all the messages he had in the dating apps, but I did notice that he was going on dates with multiple girls several times a week. Later on, I found out that the whole work situation was a lie. He was working from home the entire time, but going on dates. I took screenshots of everything and went straight to my lawyer. I filed for divorce that very same day. When my husband came home, I confronted him and he denied everything. Even with all the proof, he's still denying it. He's not speaking to our children, and you better believe I'm getting half of all his money. Bye. Story time about how my husband died and his best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers is not my story time, it's send me on Instagram. My husband and I were married for almost a decade. During that time, we had 2 kids. And of course, his passing was completely devastating to our families. And 2 weeks after my husband died, I was still grieving. But his best friend started coming around our house a lot. First, he was very emotional. Him and my husband were best friends for about 7 years. They saw each other almost every day. Not only did they work together, but they also would go to the gym together and pretty much hang out all the time. So I know this guy really, really well. When my husband would invite him over, I never got the feeling that he liked me. I mean, sure, sometimes I caught him staring at me, but I'm beautiful, so I understand. So after my husband passed, he started coming over as in, I want to take care of you, and we would just kind of cry together. I took this as his way of trying to help my husband, you know, so I just thought he was being really sweet. But exactly 1 month after my husband passed away, he started asking me weird questions. Number 1, do you want to start dating again? Number 2, don't you feel lonely at night? Number 3, you're still so young and beautiful. You need to give yourself a chance with someone else. Mind you, I'm still grieving. To these questions, I would usually say no. Obviously, I mean, why would I even be thinking about those things? I didn't put too much mind to the questions, but a few days later, he came over after he had been at a bar. As soon as I opened the door to him, he said, "Can I kiss you?" And then he did without me saying yes. Part 2 is story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers is not my story time, was send me on Instagram. As soon as I opened the door, he asked me if he could kiss me and I didn't say anything. And he grabbed me and just started kissing me. Of course, I pushed him away and told him that he needed to leave. That's when he said, "But you didn't say no." I told him I didn't say anything because I was shocked he would even ask me that. That's when he walked into the house without me inviting him, went straight to the fridge and opened up a beer. Then he starts yelling at me for giving him mixed signals. He says that since my husband died, all I've been doing is flirting with him. Since when is grieving flirting? I told him that he was completely wrong and that he needed to leave again. Then he said, "No, I'm not leaving here until you tell me the truth." That I was secretly in love with him and that I actually wanted to be with him. No, this wasn't funny to me at all. He was slurring his words and barely could stand up. I knew my kids were upstairs, so all I wanted to do was get him out of the house. That's when I grabbed my phone and started texting one of my other husband's best friends. I texted him 911, "Please come to our house now." He responded right away saying, "I'm coming over." After another minute of this guy ranting at me, I told him I was sorry for giving him mixed signals and that was never my intention, blah, blah, blah. Then he asked me out on a date. He said that he wanted to take me out and show me a good time. I said no, and I asked him to leave again, but he wouldn't. Finally, someone knocks on the door. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my dead husband's best friend won't leave me alone. Disclaimers is not my story time, instead of me on Instagram. That's when he asked me out on a date and started walking closer to me. Finally, someone knocked on the door, and it was my other husband's friend who I texted to come help me. I ran over to the door quickly and I opened it. That's when my husband's best friend, who was drunk in my house asking me out on a date, forcing me to kiss him, tells the other guy that he needs to leave. So I asked the other friend if he could just take this guy home. He said, "Yeah, of course." And he told him, "You're drunk, I'm gonna take you home now." They left together without incident and I was really relieved. But after that, I knew to watch my back now. So here's what happened. He started texting me every now and then asking me if I wanted to go to dinner, and I would not even respond to him. And after that, he started showing up to different places I was at. For example, I go to Pilates classes 5 times a week. This place is near my house, and one day he just showed up trying to take a class. As soon as I saw him, I told the instructor and they kicked him out. That's when he came back and said that he did nothing wrong and that he deserved to be in the class too. He even paid the year up front, so they had no choice but to let him in. Instead, I left. Then he followed me outside to the parking lot and told me that I needed to relax. Said, "It's not like I'm following you," which he clearly was. I got in my car and left. That very same night, he sent me a message apologizing apologizing for acting crazy. Then he told me that all he wanted was just to be close to me and the kids. By the way, my kids really do love him. They ask about him all the time since he stopped coming over, and I don't even know what to tell them. After a few weeks of him not acting crazy, he asked me if he could come over and I said yes. Decided to invite all my husband's friends and we had a nice dinner. But again, this guy asked me out. I said no, but my best friend thinks I should give him a shot. He's good looking and rich. What do you guys think? I'm being accused of rape and I don't know if I actually did it. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. This all started 2 years ago at a party. 2 years ago, my friends called me up and told me they had a party to go to. Ironically, I did not want to go to this party. I felt really tired from work and I just wanted the night off to chill. That's until my friend called me and told me that the girl that I liked would be at the party. Here's a little backstory on the girl and me. Her and I met through mutual friends, and from the moment that I met her, I really liked her. The night I met her, I asked her out and she said no. So I left it at that. Of course, my feelings didn't change for her. I still liked her. Anytime I would see her at parties or friends' houses, we would always chat. I never asked her out again, but she could clearly tell that I still liked her. I had a bad habit of staring at her. So when my friend told me that she'd be at the party, I decided to go. As soon as we got to the party, I saw that she was talking to this one guy. Now I have to confess, it made me really angry. This is when I decided to have a few beers. Now here's when things start going bad. I'm starting to get tipsy and my friends start telling me to go talk to her. I said no, but they insisted. Instead of sticking to my guns, I decided to do what my friends wanted me to do. I walked up to this girl, not even saying hello, and I said, "Are you dating this guy?" While this guy is standing right next to us. That's when she pushes me aside and says, "It's none of your business." Part 2 is I'm being accused of rape and I don't know if I actually did it. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. That's when she pushes me to the side and tells me it's none of my business. That's when the guy that was standing next to her tells me to leave. So I did. I walked back to my friends completely defeated and embarrassed. I felt humiliated. Almost 5 minutes later, she comes up to me and apologizes. She said, "I'm sorry I pushed you." I told her it was okay and if we could just talk. We went to the backyard and I asked her why she wasn't interested in me. That's when she told me that she had been in an abusive relationship and she wasn't looking for anything else. I told her that I wasn't looking for a relationship either and that I just really liked her. Basically, I just wanted to hang out with her. She said she wanted to stay away from guys for now, and I said why. And that's when she kissed me. I was completely shocked. I was not expecting that. Now I could tell that she had been drinking too because she was a little tipsy, so I kissed her back. I could hear my friends cheering in the background. They're such idiots. So I asked her if she wanted to go somewhere more private. We ended up going to one of the bedrooms in the house, and we kept on kissing. At this point, she did not say no. It felt like she wanted it just as much as I did, and we went for it. And to be honest, it only lasted about a minute. After we finished, we kissed and we went back to the party. She held my hand for the rest of the night. In my eyes, things had gone pretty good. But then my worst nightmare began. Part 3 is up. I'm being accused of rape and I don't know if I actually did it. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I repeat, this is not my story time. After we did the deed, she held my hand for the rest of the night. And there were witnesses to her kissing me and holding my hand that night. A few moments later, she completely disappeared. I didn't see her at all for the next 3 days. I decided to call her the next day, but she did not answer her phone. I also sent her messages, but she didn't text back. 4 days later, I get a knock on my door, and it's her dad. And that's when he told me that his daughter was accusing me of rape. I was in complete shock when he said that. Then he asked me what my version was. I told him exactly what happened and he said that she probably said no and I kept going. I told him that at no point did she say no and that people had seen us kissing and holding hands throughout the night. Then he said I took advantage of her being drunk, but she wasn't even that drunk. He also said she was probably so drunk that she didn't even realize she was holding my hand. Here's the thing. After he left, I sat down and started thinking about the entire night. And I really started thinking back. Did she say no? Did she tell me to stop? I was drunk at the time, but I swear to God she didn't, or at least I didn't hear her say it. Body language wasn't saying stop. Here's the thing. My parents have a lot of money. Now they're asking my parents to just give them lots of money and that they'll drop everything. My parents are just gonna pay them the money. What should I do? My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I know you guys are gonna all say yes immediately, but hear me out. My boyfriend and I have been dating for 6 months. My best friend and I actually met him at a bar. That night, I never expected that he would ever come after me. I consider my best friend the prettier of the two of us, so I'm used to her getting hit on instead of me. But that night, my boyfriend came to me. He talked to me pretty much the entire night, and my best friend told me to go for it. So I did. He and I spent the night together, and after that, we were inseparable. To the point where he wanted me to move in with him after 2 months. My parents thought I was absolutely crazy and they didn't want me to move in with him, but I did anyway. I come from a Latino family, so this was absolutely reprehensible. I went against my family's wishes and they actually stopped speaking to me for a little bit, but luckily I got them back. My boyfriend during that time gave me all his support. He told me that my family would come around eventually and that they would see that we were in love. So living together was a logical next step. After 3 months of living together, I knew that I wanted to marry him, and he would talk about marriage all the time. He asked me what kind of ring I would want and what I would want for the proposal. We even started talking about our honeymoon. I was also starting to get in the best shape of my life. I was looking super snatched. My boyfriend told me that he loved the way that I look, but that he didn't want me to get skinny. Again, I just felt like he was supporting me and loving me. Around this time, my best friend started dating somebody. After a few weeks, they got really serious about the relationship. And of course, we went on double dates. After the third double date, I noticed that my boyfriend was getting a little annoyed. I got the feeling he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend. Follow for part 2. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. Should I leave him? Disclaimer's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. I asked him if he was jealous of my best friend's boyfriend, and that's when he said no. But every time we would go on double dates, he would get in such a bad mood. 3 weeks ago, my best friend told me that she was moving in with her boyfriend. And when I told my boyfriend that they were moving in, his face almost went green. I asked him what was wrong, and he said nothing. After that, he went into the bathroom and didn't come out for 40 minutes. Again, I asked him if he was okay, and he said yeah. And I sat him down and asked him to be honest with me. That's when he said, I'm attracted to your best friend. Instantly started to cry because I had already been suspecting it. He explained to me that he didn't have any feelings for her until she got a boyfriend, and that he felt that he had some sort of ownership over her. Before my best friend got a boyfriend, the three of us would hang out a lot, and not once then did I ever get a feeling that he was attracted to her. He told me that he would never act on his feelings, but he didn't want to go on any more double dates. I asked him if he wanted to be with her instead of me, and he said absolutely not. He said that I was the love of his life, and that attraction only meant attraction, that he didn't have feelings for her. A few days later, he took me to the most expensive restaurant in our city and asked me to marry him, but I didn't know what to say. I can't stop thinking that he's attracted to my best friend. Part 3 is up. My boyfriend confessed to me that he's attracted to my best friend. What should I do? Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. After he proposed, I told him I didn't know what to say. He told me to think it over. I finally decided to tell my best friend what my boyfriend had told me, that he had confessed that he was attracted to her. First, she laughed. I told her no, I'm serious. He confessed that he's attracted to you. That's when she told me I needed to break up with him. That's when I told her that he had also proposed. And she said, well, then you really need to break up with him now. That's when she told me that she didn't want me to resent her and that it was completely out of her control. And I didn't. I promised her that I would never resent her for my boyfriend being attracted to her. It's not like she ever did anything on purpose to make him feel attracted. She also told me that marrying him right now would be rushing into it, and she's kind of right. We've only really known each other for 6 months. Then she told me that she's never gotten the feeling that he's attracted to her. She's never caught him looking at her or anything like that. So now her theory is that he's looking for an easy way out, and that he probably wants me to break up with him. But my boyfriend is still sweet and super affectionate. He's constantly showering me with love. My best friend thinks that if I stay with him, our relationship will suffer. I've known my best friend longer. What should I do? Should I break up with my girlfriend for sending her nudes to my brother? Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. I'm a 25-year-old guy and my brother is 23. We have always had a really good relationship. We're really close. We play sports together. We just spend a lot of time together in general. My girlfriend and I have only known each other for a year. We started dating 2 months later, so we've been together for about 7 to 8 months. To be honest, I don't exactly know how long. Am I the perfect man? No. Are we the perfect couple? No. But you know what? I put a lot of effort into our relationship. For example, she gets really bad mood swings when she has her period. So I always make the effort to go buy her groceries. I fill up her car with gas. And on her first day of her period, I always go over to her apartment and make her a nice meal. And I always buy her favorite vegan cupcakes from Whole Foods. Sure, I always forget about our anniversary and stuff like that, but it's the big things that count, you know? So my girlfriend always jokes about how cute my brother is. I mean, is it really cute? I don't know. He's just my brother. She'll go out of her way to make comments about him. Now, I'm not a jealous guy, so I never really say anything. She did make a comment in front of my brother and it made him uncomfortable. So afterwards, I asked her not to say those things in front of my brother. And if you must know, go to part 2 to see what she said about my brother. Did I break up with my girlfriend for sending her nudes to my brother? Disclaimer isn't on my story time. I sent me on Instagram. While we're sitting at dinner with my parents, she says, your brother is hot AF. My brother looks up from his dinner plate and just stares at me. My mom laughed awkwardly, and my dad literally didn't know what she was talking about. I could see how uncomfortable it made my brother. So after the dinner, I asked my girlfriend to not make any comments about how good looking my brother is. But then her weird obsession with my brother just got worse. He and I are both really into fitness and usually go to the gym together. And she started coming to the gym with us. Except she would follow my brother around like a lost puppy at the gym. Again, my brother would just turn to look at me and be like, can you come grab her? So I physically had to pull her away from my brother. After a couple of times of us going to the gym and this happening, I sat her down and told her that she really needed to stop this time. Honestly, at this point, I found it kind of funny. My girlfriend's also really funny, so she makes everything into a joke. So honestly, I didn't assume anything terrible about it. Not until a few weeks ago when everything went down. Brother started dating a new girl. He showed my girlfriend a picture of her. My girlfriend immediately started judging her by her looks. She pretty much said she was ugly and that she had really bad skin. And that my brother could do a lot better. Part 3 is up. Should I break up with my girlfriend for sending her nudes to my brother? Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. After my girlfriend started ripping into my brother's new girlfriend, I put my foot down and told her that she needed to stop immediately. My brother was clearly uncomfortable, and still she thought it was all a funny joke. As I drove her home, I asked her why she had to do that. She went on a rant about how hot my brother was and how ugly his new girlfriend was. Then again, she started criticizing everything about her physically. Said her hair was dry, that she had too many pimples, that she was shaped like a little boy. That's when I told her that she didn't need to say everything she thought. Once I dropped her off at her place, I decided to go to the gym. 5 seconds after stepping into the gym, my brother sends me a screenshot of 2 nudes my girlfriend sent him. Call my brother and he says, dude, WTF. Then I call my girlfriend and she says, what's up? Enter the screenshot and she said, oh my god, I must have sent that by mistake. I'm so sorry. And I said, why would you send that by mistake? She came up with this whole story about how she was actually trying to send them to me. And she sent me a screenshot of her messages. And she said that she probably just clicked on his by mistake. I don't believe it. I basically ghosted her for an entire week. My brother's still pretty pissed off. She's begging me to come back to her, but I don't know what to do. Could she be telling the truth? Storytime about how my best friend and I beat up my husband after he hit me. Disclaimer is not my storytime, it's sending me on Instagram. My husband and I have always had a really toxic relationship. He's always been extremely jealous and controlling. We've been together for 2 years. And within those 2 years, he's managed to separate me from all of my friends and my family. I still keep in contact with my family secretly whenever he's not around. I usually call my mom as soon as he leaves the house and I talk to her for about an hour. But my husband somehow always finds out when I'm talking to my mom. Sometimes I even think that he put cameras in our house so that he could watch me when he's not home. I usually work from home, so I'm always in my house. And he loves it that way. Even if I want to go to the supermarket, I have to call him and ask him for permission. But my best friend has always stuck by me. She comes over unannounced just to check up on me, and my husband hates her. He even told her one time that she needed to stay away from our house. But of course, she didn't listen to him. My husband has gotten physical with me in the past, but never as bad as this last time. Got into an altercation because I wanted to go out with my best friend. We just wanted to have a simple dinner, but he didn't want me to go. But I decided to dress up and I left the house. As I was leaving the house, he grabbed me and slapped me. Best friend was outside, came in, and she started punching him. So I started punching him too. I went to my parents' house and I've been staying there since. But my husband keeps wanting me to come back. What should I do? I hooked up with my stepbrother and now he's blackmailing me. What should I do? Disclaimers on my storytime was sending me on Instagram. Yes, I admit it. I'm an absolutely vile human being for hooking up with my stepbrother. Okay, but he's really, really hot. We're both 18, but this all went down when we were 17. A little backstory. My parents got divorced 5 years ago and this affected me severely. I was so angry at them for separating us. I began to have a lot of anxiety about it. My dad was the one to move out of the house. So my mom and I tried to make the best of it. Not 2 months after their divorce was finalized, my mom met another guy, and he was the perfect man. He was really good looking and the CEO of a huge company. My mom's 45 and he's actually 10 years older than her. Being the angry teen that I was, I didn't want to accept it. She invited him over so that we could meet, but I was pretty much an asshole the entire time. To be honest, after the dinner, I actually ended up liking him. He was really funny, he made my mom laugh, and he understood my humor. All of this, of course, made my mom really happy. A few days later, this man calls me and tells me that he wants to propose to my mom. So he essentially wanted to get my permission first. So I said yes. That's when he moved in with his son. Part 2 is up. I hooked up with my stepbrother and now he's blackmailing me. That's when my mom's new fiance and his son were moving into our house. I decided that I would try to make the best of it. I was always so angry that I just needed to give myself a break. And the first time that I met him was when he moved in. As soon as he came in through the door, I was literally speechless. He was so hot. Like the best looking guy that I had ever seen in my life. I'm sorry, you guys, I have hiccups right now. And we couldn't stop looking at each other. We all sat down to have lunch, and he and I just stared at each other the entire time. That's when my stepdad told us that after the wedding, we were all moving to a new house. Like I said, he has a lot of money. And I was actually really excited about this. A new house meant a new start. But guess what? My stepbrother started coming to the same school that I did. So we would basically go to school together every single day. That's when we both found out that we had so much in common. While we drove to school, he would always turn to look at me. And I would ask what's up, and he would say nothing. But one night he came into my room and he kissed me. Part 3 is up. So there I am making out with my stepbrother in my own bed. Mind you, I was asleep when he came in. As soon as I realized he was kissing me, I got out of bed. That's when he told me that he knew that we were both attracted to each other and that we should just do it. I stayed quiet and I didn't know how to respond. I felt super shy and embarrassed. Then he grabbed me and kissed me again. I told him to leave my room and he did. But after that, the sexual tension was real. I always caught him staring at me. Even at school, he would stare at me. And he would go out of his way to bump into me. One day we were driving home and he pulls over on a deserted road. He started kissing me and I couldn't resist. We ended up making out in his car for like an hour. After that, he told me that he wanted me to be his girlfriend, but in secret, and that he didn't want our parents to find out. But I said no because it's wrong. We live in the same house and our parents are married to each other. Of course, he got angry. Now he just grabs me and kisses me whenever he wants. And he says that I am his girlfriend even if I don't want to. And he told me that if I don't accept, he'll tell his dad about us. I really like him, but I think it's wrong. What should I do? A very well-known influencer who is hooking up with a famous football player who has a wife and kids. Am I the asshole? Claimers is not my story time. Was sending me on Instagram. Lost my job in early 2020, obviously due to COVID. Instead of looking for another job, I set my mind to becoming famous on social media. Knew that I could make it happen, but I didn't know how yet. I did some research, so I basically started copying everything everybody else did, like all the other famous influencers. I dabbled in fashion, makeup, lots of lifestyle content, but finally I landed on bikini content. This just put me on a new level. Started gaining tons of followers. After posting every single day for about 6 months, I was almost at 400,000. This is when all the DMs started rolling in. Really famous rappers, actors, athletes, comedians, other influencers, big YouTubers. I mean, the list goes on and on. So of course, I would reply to all of their DMs. Some offered to fly me out to see them, and others were living in the same city that I was. So I basically started going out on dates. The first date I ever went on was with a rapper. I don't want to give too many details because I think you guys could guess who this is. He was very popular in 2010s. I mean, he's still popular now, but he made a lot of good music then. Anyway, he had me come over to his house, spent the night at his house, and we basically talked the entire night. Surprisingly, we had really good conversations, and that was that. And I got a DM from a really big football player who I knew was already married and had kids. That didn't stop me from messaging him back. Part 2 is up. I'm a well-known influencer who's hooking up with a famous football player who's married and has kids. Am I the asshole? Disclaimer, this is not my story time. It's sending me on Instagram. When I saw his DM, I quickly answered. Sent me little hard eyes. So I replied back with some hearts. Then he asked me where I lived. I told him that I was in LA and he said, okay, cool. I can fly you out. I said, sure. Literally the next day, I was flying first class to go see this guy. Got me a suite at a really nice hotel. He said he would show up at 7, but he actually showed up at 11 p.m. By this point, I was already in my pajamas and my skincare. Once he came up to the room, he apologized for being so late. That's when he said that he liked that I wasn't wearing makeup. It makes me laugh so much because before he arrived, I had a full face of makeup on and a freaking cocktail dress and heels. He said that I was a natural beauty. That's when he basically ordered the entire menu from the hotel. He ordered steak, pasta, pancakes, waffles, French toast, champagne, and a bunch of other stuff. He asked me if I wanted a salad. I said yes. While we were waiting for the food, he started kissing me and we basically ended up doing it. It happened really quick. It was over in like 2 minutes. Afterward, he kissed me and then the food came. He proceeded to eat almost everything that he ordered, but he left me some salad and fries. That was it. It's like he was telling me that he only wanted me to eat salad. After that, he started asking me questions like if I was dating other people. Said no, but I was going on dates. When he told me that he only wanted me to be exclusive with him, that he would fly me out whenever he was available. I said yes, but I knew that I wasn't going to go through with that. I'm a well-known influencer who's hooking up with a famous football player who has a wife and kids. Am I the asshole? Claimers is not my story time. Sending me on Instagram. That's when he told me he wanted me to be exclusive with him, that he would basically fly me out whenever he wanted. Obviously said yes to his face, but I was not planning on it. Would I be flying around the country to go see this one guy? Good news is when I got back home, I had a bunch of new DMs. So I went on a few more dates. I went on a date with a very famous YouTuber. It was super fun, really casual, and didn't really expect anything from me, which was really nice. When we went on our date, he actually treated me like a queen. If this guy asked me to be his girlfriend, I would totally say yes in a heartbeat. Then the football player actually ended up calling me the same night that I was on the date with the YouTuber. Decided to go to the bathroom and answer the phone. That's when he started acting all jealous and asked me where I was. He said that I should be home resting and ready to go see him again. He asked me if I could fly out the next day. I said no because I did have a modeling job, thank God. I mean, a girl needs to make money. Then he said that he would start giving me an allowance of $5,000 a month. I said yes to in a heartbeat. So I ended up canceling the modeling job. I flew out the next day to go see him and he actually gave me the $5,000. Said that every time I saw him he would give me more. But here's the thing, he has a wife and kids and I do feel bad about that. This has been happening now for a few months. I have more money now than I ever had. And I'm still modeling on the side, so I'm making my own money. I'm still going out on dates with other guys. What should I do? My husband refused to touch me on our wedding night and says that it's my fault. Our wedding was only 2 weeks ago and to this day he still has not touched me. Here's the thing, we had an arranged marriage. My family is extremely traditional and where we come from it's normal to have arranged marriages. When I was 12 years old, my parents told me who I was going to end up marrying. This all seemed very normal to me growing up because I saw my sisters and cousins doing it. But now that I'm in this, I realize how terrible it is. My now husband didn't actually grow up in the same country I did. In fact, we had only met a week before the actual wedding. I had a really bad feeling a month before the wedding though. So I told my parents I did not want to marry him. That's when they told me that if I didn't go through with the marriage, they would disown me. I would have nowhere to live, no money, and no family. So, of course, I agreed to marry him. A week before the wedding, my parents hosted a dinner for his family and mine. When he came in through the door, I was happy to see that he was actually attractive, but he didn't look at me once throughout the whole night. Part 2 is up. My new husband refused to touch me on our wedding night and says it's all my fault. We finally met a week before the wedding. When he came in through the door, I was so happy to see that he was actually attractive. But this man barely looked at me the entire night. Parents presented us to each other and he glanced at me. That was it. He was extremely cold and basically didn't speak to any member of my family. The only person he did speak to was my father, of course. I spent the entire dinner trying to make eye contact with him, but not once did it happen. Thankfully, the dinner only lasted about 2 hours and his parents and him left. As soon as they did, I burst into tears. Also, I know I'm a beautiful girl. I've had many suitors come to my house and ask my parents for my hand in marriage. They had agreed to this arranged marriage so long ago that it never even gave any other guys a chance. The worst part is that one of the guys that asked to marry me a few years ago, he and I went to the same school, got along, and dare I say liked each other. At least he would look me in the face. I told my parents that he didn't even look at me once. My dad said that I was completely overreacting, but my mother agreed with me, thank God. She told my dad that my fiance's behavior was completely unacceptable, and that the least he could have done was at least said hello to me. My mom was also upset that he didn't even say hello to her, and that he was openly disrespecting our family. I tried to convince my dad to cancel the marriage, but he said no. Part 3 is up. My husband refused to touch me on our wedding night and blamed it all on me. He refused to look at me on our wedding day. He didn't even kiss me once. The only time he touched me that night was when the photographer asked us to hold hands for a picture. And even then, the way he grabbed my hand was so cold. When it came time for us to go to our room, I was already very upset. He could tell. We got into the room and I went straight to the shower. I took off my dress, showered, and came out. And when I did, he pretended to be asleep. That's when I grabbed him and turned him around. I asked him why he wouldn't touch me or even look at me. That if he didn't want to marry me, he shouldn't have. That's when he told me that he never really wanted to marry me because he had heard things about me. He said that we had some mutual friends, but he refuses to tell me who these friends are. He claims they told him that I had a secret boyfriend and that I had dated many men, which couldn't be further from the truth. First off, my parents are super strict. The only time I was unchaperoned was in school. And he said, "It's your fault, I will never touch you." I started to cry and I called my parents. I literally ran away from him. I told my parents what he said and thankfully they were on my side. My father says the marriage is void if he refuses to have children with me. But guess what? I started doing some digging and I found out that he was the one seeing other women and men. What should I do? My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. My mother-in-law has done everything in her power to separate my boyfriend and I. And though she doesn't admit it, she loves it. When my boyfriend and I started dating, we were both really happy, really loving and affectionate. We love to spend time with each other. So our relationship is really well-rounded. In fact, my boyfriend comes to my apartment every single day. Without me asking him, he always just wants to spend time with me. After 3 weeks of dating, we decided we'd meet each other's parents. Even though he was incredibly nervous to meet my parents, they went out of their way to make him feel at home. My parents had invited us over for dinner, and they literally made his favorite foods and even bought his favorite dessert. Needless to say, my parents loved him and he loved my parents. The following week, we met his parents. It went okay, I guess. His parents wanted to take us out to dinner, which was nice. His dad was super charismatic, funny, and made a lot of conversation. His mom hugged me and kissed me, so I thought she was okay. But throughout the dinner, she would kind of look at me and not really say anything. Basically, she only responded when my boyfriend talked. Obviously, I didn't want to make a big deal out of it, so I didn't tell my boyfriend anything. Next day, I get a text message from my mother-in-law. She asked me to have lunch with her. Just the two of us. Part 2 is up. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I'm considering breaking up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, it's not my story time. I sent me on Instagram. When she asked me out to have lunch by ourselves, I said yes. During the lunch, she took me to this really fancy restaurant, and she did not tell me that it was so fancy. So I showed up in jeans and a cardigan. As soon as she sees me, she says, "Oh, why didn't you wear a dress?" I told her I didn't realize the restaurant was so fancy, and I apologized. She said it was okay and for me to sit down quickly. By the way, my boyfriend's family has a lot of money, so she's accustomed to the, nicer things in life. Not so bad sitting in that restaurant with my cheap jeans and my cardigan, while everyone else was in dresses and beautiful sandals. We made small talk and it was actually kind of nice. After we ordered, she started asking me questions though. She started asking me how many boyfriends I'd had in the past, what my friends were like, and she even asked me how much money I earned per year. She was clearly trying to find out if I was only interested in her son's money, which no, I'm not. Then she asked me if I wanted to have kids. I mean, this isn't even a conversation that I've had with my boyfriend yet, so to have it with his mom felt just strange. I told her in the future I definitely wanted to have kids, but not anytime soon. That's when she said that's such a shame. I want grandchildren within 2 years. I laughed and told her that her son and I hadn't even spoken about marriage. We hadn't been together very long. When the bill came, of course I offered to pay for it, but she said, "No, darling, that's okay." But when she looked at the bill, she said, "Wow, that's a lot." Mind you, she was the one ordering the expensive drinks. An hour later, I got a text message from my boyfriend. He said his mom came home crying after having lunch with me. She told him that I was rude to her, that I didn't offer to pay. Part 3. My mother-in-law is so terrible that I want to break up with my boyfriend. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Was sending me on Instagram. That's when my boyfriend told me that his mom came home crying after she had lunch with me. She said that I didn't offer to pay for the bill and that I was rude to her. Of course, I quickly defended myself and told him that never happened. I did offer to pay for the bill. He told me that I needed to give her some time. So a few days later, I went to their house and apologized to her personally. I told her that I was sorry if I had done anything to offend her. She told me that I just needed to be a little more sensitive. So after that, I did not speak to her at all. But she noticed every time I would go over to their house, she would make comments about my clothes, my hair. On one occasion, she hugged me and grabbed my arm. That's when she said, "Wow, from far away it looks like you're thin, but you don't feel very thin." I laughed hysterically. Obviously she wanted to hurt my feelings, but I just thought it was funny. One occasion she brought up my boyfriend's ex, only to insinuate that I wasn't as pretty as her. I laughed at her comment and didn't say anything. She once came over to my boyfriend's apartment while I was cooking and literally proceeded to take over and judge everything that I was doing. She told me that my food was too plain and that she felt bad for my boyfriend, and that obviously he had lost weight because of how terrible my food was. The last straw was when she told my boyfriend that I was talking to somebody on the phone. I told my boyfriend I was talking to my mom, and she told him that she thought it was a man. I know it's not my boyfriend's fault, but he always sides with her. I'm always at a loss. What should I do? Story time about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was really me. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Was sending me on Instagram. The funny thing is that when my boyfriend and I got together, I did not want the relationship. He begged me for 6 months to be his girlfriend. And you see, the only reason why I didn't want to was because I knew that he was a player. Every single one of my friends had basically gone out with him. I was just the last girl in the group to go out with him because I always kept saying no. And looking back, he was definitely obsessed with me because I never gave in to him. I was the girl that he couldn't have. During those 6 months, he would hit me up on Instagram every single day. Anytime I posted posted a story, he would automatically reply to it. He would like and comment on all of my pictures. We also had a lot of mutual friends, so we would end up at the same events and parties. And every time that he would see me in public, he would zero in on me. He would basically ignore all the other girls at the party and make me feel like I was the only one there. And he would constantly compliment me and tell me how beautiful I was, how attracted to me he was, how I was just so different from all the other girls that he had gone out with. Trust me, I knew that he was love bombing me, but eventually after 6 months, I was like, he's gotta be honest. So I decided to give him a chance. And let me tell you, he has been the perfect boyfriend. He's so sweet and considerate. My parents absolutely adore him, and my mom never likes anybody. See, I come from a Latino family. One day I decided to make a second Instagram account. It was just an inspiration account. I posted cute outfits of other people I liked, makeup, nails. Still one day I see my boyfriend in my DMs. Part 2 is Part 2 of how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram and not knowing it was actually me. Disclaimers on my story time is sending me on Instagram. That's when I opened up my account to see that my boyfriend had DM'd me. First I thought he was joking. When I clicked into the message and I read it, my heart and my stomach sank. He was taking a shot. He thought that I was some sort of influencer. Now when I created the second account, I was already with him. But I really didn't tell him that I was creating it. It was just for fun for myself. I did start gaining followers. I did put in a lot of work into this account, but it was pretty much a visual diary just for me. It just so happens that other girls liked the aesthetic and I started gaining a lot of followers. I had about 10,000. But here's my theory. Since my account is probably listed to be in the area that he is, probably popped up on one of his mutual lists or his explore page or something like that, because I was trying to figure out how he found the account. The message read, "Hey beautiful, I really love your pictures and love your style. I'm also really into fashion. Lol, no he's not. And I would love to take you out on a date. I know all the good spots around the city. Let me know if you're down." So when I clicked on my boyfriend's profile and realized that he had hidden all of the pictures we had together. So if he had DM'd any girl and she went to look at his profile, she would automatically assume that he's single because he doesn't have a picture of another girl. Instead of freaking out and calling him, I decided to keep cool. Instead, I called my mom. She told me to play along with the conversation. So that's what I did. Messaged him back and said, "Wow, I really love your pictures and your style too. What's your favorite designer?" He replied, "Louis Vuitton." Ew. By the end of the conversation, we had a date for that night. And I showed up. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my boyfriend tried to cheat on me with my fake Instagram account, not knowing it was me. Disclaimer is not my story time, it's sending me on Instagram. At the end of the conversation he thought he was having with some other girl, we had decided to go on a date. And like I said, I was playing along, so I was super nice to him. I complimented all the clothes that he wore. I told him that he looked so attractive in his pictures and that I was really looking forward to meeting him. He chose a restaurant downtown. And of course he did, because I live nowhere near that area. In fact, he and I never go out on dates there. So he knew that he wouldn't see anybody he knew. Here's where it gets actually really funny. This man sent a picture of the outfit he wanted to wear. A brown fedora with the Louis Vuitton monogram on it, a Louis Vuitton belt, black pants, and a black shirt. So I replied saying, "That's perfect. I'll wear a black dress and my favorite Louis Vuitton purse." But I was still heartbroken. Here's what I did. I asked my mom to come with me to the restaurant. Her and I did our makeup, our hair, and we got dressed up really, really nice. And I decided to wear a black dress. My mom actually happened to have an old Louis Vuitton purse in her closet that she never wore, so I grabbed it. My mom and I show up to the restaurant and my boyfriend is already there. So I decided to walk in and turn around, so that way he could only see my back. My mom decided to stay outside of the restaurant, but she knew to come in as soon as he saw me. I suddenly feel a tap on my shoulder and that's when I turn around. He says, "Oh hey babe, what are you doing here?" The look on this man's face was of pure fear. That's when I hand him my phone so that he could see that the account that he was messaging was actually mine. That's when he says, "You lied to me?" He was mad at me for pretending to be somebody else. Then he started apologizing, and then he said that he knew the whole time and that he was just joking around. I broke up with him and haven't spoken to him since. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Should I leave him? Disclaimer is not my story time, it's send me on Instagram. I'm so sad about the palette. My fiance and I met a few years ago through friends. When we first met each other, I had a really bad first impression of him. First off, he was completely up himself. All he did was talk about himself and never once asked me questions. We were surrounded by other people, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt when he asked me out. I said yes, but our first date was kind of the same. He only really talked about himself, his career, the things he likes to do, his favorite foods, his family, his dog. I eventually just started volunteering information because he wouldn't really ask me. After our date, I didn't speak to him for a full 2 weeks. I was really turned off by his attitude, but then he messaged me saying that he was really nervous and that he realizes that he probably could have been a little more talkative. I said, "Yeah, you could have been." I told him how I really felt and he did apologize and he asked me out to dinner again. This time I invited him to my apartment and he made us a full 4-course meal. By the way, he's a chef. Obviously, that night, I completely fell in love with him. He made all of my favorite foods, but the gourmet version. A few months later, we became boyfriend and girlfriend. There were still a few things that I didn't like about him, though. Like, he never really had anything to talk about other than himself. Exactly a year after we met, he decided to propose, and I said yes. But when I asked him to do things for the wedding, he says no. Part 2 is up. Story time about how my fiance is refusing to help me plan our wedding. Disclaimer, this is not my story time. I said on Instagram. To be honest, when he asked me to marry him, I was totally blindsided. Honestly, felt like our relationship was starting to get stale. So when he asked me to marry him, I was like, for real? He told me that I was the first person who ever made him feel important. And looking back, I realized that it's because he only talked about himself and I really let him talk about only himself. Anyway, I immediately said yes out of the excitement. But when I called my mom to tell her, I was actually crying. Which is like, okay, maybe I shouldn't marry him then. A few weeks into our engagement, we hadn't talked about planning at all. So I decided to ask him, like, what do you want the wedding to be like? That's when he told me that he didn't really care, but that he would just give me money for it. I mean, on one hand, that makes me really happy because I don't want my parents to have to pay for the wedding, and he has a lot of money. But on the other hand, I want him to be involved, especially for the food because he's a chef. I decided to hire a wedding planner because my job is extremely busy. I work in marketing. Asked him to go to a few meetings with me. He said no. When I finally found the perfect wedding planner, I asked my fiance if we could go have lunch with him, and he said no. This is when I blew up in his face. I asked him why he wasn't participating at all. That's when he told me that he was too busy at the restaurant, that he didn't have time to do anything with the wedding. I was like, okay, fine. When it came time to choosing the caterers, I demanded that he go with me. He told me that he would try to get off work, but he never did. Every time I tried to schedule it, he would say that he was busy with work. That's when I told him that his restaurant, which is super fancy, should just cater the whole wedding. And he said no. He told me they were way too busy and ready to get a Michelin star, so there was absolutely no way they could cater his wedding. That's when he said, you can handle it, I trust you. I went home and cried the entire night. Part 3 is up. Story time about how my fiance refuses to help me plan our wedding. Claimers to know my story time. I sent him on Instagram. After I got home and cried, he came home and asked me what was wrong. That's when I told him that he didn't seem excited about the wedding and that leaving all the planning to me made me feel like I was his employee, as if I had nothing better to do, which I do have my career just like he has his. Not to mention the fact that me picking everything I want for our wedding makes it feel like it's my wedding and not ours. He told me that I was overreacting. He also said that he was excited for the wedding, but that he was too tired and too busy to even think about it. That's when I told him that I was really busy and I was really tired too. And he begrudgingly told me that he would carve out some time this week so that we could speak to some of the caterers. I told the wedding planner and he started setting up some meetings. But of course, my fiance canceled on the first 2. He did show up to the 3rd one, but all he did was criticize the food. Then we went cake tasting. I expected this to be fun. When my friends have had cake tastings for their wedding, they always have so much fun. As soon as we showed up to the cake shop, he asked me, where did you find this? That's when I told him that our planner had found it. He said it looked like a supermarket bakery. That's when I told him that I don't mind supermarket bakeries and that it was probably just as good as a French bakery. He laughed and said, wow, you're funny, babe. We tasted the cakes and he actually liked them. Thank God. But then he requested to go to more cake tastings. We ended up going to 5 other places. This was already too much for me. I got a new account at work and I'm still trying to lose weight for the wedding. So him making me run around trying to taste cake is like the straw that broke the camel's back. After 2 weeks, we finally decided on a cake flavor. Most people must have fun planning their weddings, right? But I just feel like I'm drowning. I have to make all the important decisions on my own. I decided to involve my mom and sister and they've helped me so much. Of course, the wedding planner is helping me too, but ultimately the decisions have to be made by me. He hasn't made any effort to help me with anything else. Kinda want to break up with him, but I feel like this isn't a big enough reason to break up with him. What should I do? Story time about how a strange man abused me because I didn't want to give him my phone number. Disclaimers are not my story time. Send me on Instagram. I'm a 34-year-old mother of 2. I'm also a single mom, but I do own my own bakery. Most days I work from home, but I do go to the bakery every single day to open and close. I usually have about 4 employees at the bakery at once because we get really busy. On this occasion, one of my workers called out sick, so I decided to step in for her. I dropped my kids off at school and then I went straight to the bakery. Let me just fill you guys in on what I was wearing. I had on a matching set of activewear, so blue leggings and a blue top, which covered my stomach. In other words, I wasn't showing a lot of skin. When I get to the bakery, I see a man sitting in the corner. He had purchased his food and he was eating. I had a quick chat with all my employees asking them how the day was going, and they told me that the man had kept staring at them the entire time. And I look at the guy and sure enough, he is staring at all of us. I asked them to just ignore him. But this was a huge mistake. After a few minutes, the man came back up to the counter. He asked me for a sandwich and I gave it to him. He paid and went back to sit down, but then kept staring at me the entire time. And at my other female employees. Part 2 is up. Story time about how a strange man abused me because I didn't want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer, is not my story time. Send me on Instagram. The guy just kept staring at me and my employees. After a bit, I asked him if he was okay and if he wanted something else. Obviously, he said no and just kept sitting at the table. But again, he kept staring at my employees and at me. This obviously made us uncomfortable, so I decided to do something about it. I decided that the best thing would be to just close the store. I go to the man and tell him that we were going to close and if he needed anything else to buy it now. Then he says, actually, I would like to talk to you. And I said, sure, what's up? Honestly, I thought he was going gonna ask for a job, but no. He starts complimenting my hair, my body, and told me that I was too beautiful to be working there. That's when I told him that I was actually the owner of the bakery. And he says, wow, that's even more impressive. Let me describe this man. He was actually okay looking, mid-20s, and dressed pretty well. He just looked like a normal guy. Then he asked me to sit down at the table. I said no. That's when he told me that he'd been coming to my bakery for a week and that he'd been watching me. Then he grabbed my hand and pulled me down to sit next to him. Then he proceeds to put his hand on my lap. Creepy. Part 3 is up. Story time about how a strange man abused me because I did not want to give him my phone number. Disclaimer is not my story time. I sent him on Instagram. That's when he slid his hand onto my lap. I quickly get up from the table and ask him to leave. That's when he said, why are you freaking out? I'm just trying to get your number. Then I told him that there was absolutely zero chance I would ever give him my phone number. And he said, oh, you think you have a choice? And he holds out his phone so that I could type in my number. I pushed his phone back and again asked him to leave. He threatened me and said that he wouldn't leave until I gave him my number. My knees and hands were shaking. Look back at my employees behind the counter and they are scared. That's when one of my employees says, I'm gonna call the cops. And I said, yes, call them. As soon as I turned back to this man, he swings at me. He wasn't able to reach my face, but then he grabbed me by the shoulders and pushed me down onto the ground. This all happened in about 30 seconds. As I'm on the ground, he starts slapping me. I covered my face with my arms and I just started kicking at him. And my 2 female employees, who by the way are like 17 and 18, start attacking the guy. And then he starts hitting them. Thankfully, 2 men from the street hear me yelling. I came in and tackled him and the police arrived 2 minutes later. I found out this guy was stalking me for a month. I got a restraining order. Be careful out. Okay, literally most embarrassing story of my life. I started acting and modeling when I was 8, so I should have some experience, right? So I was taking a speech class in college and I had to write an essay about what I saw myself doing within the next 5 years. And because I am an annoying overachiever, I wrote an entire essay about how successful I would be as an actress. Guess what I wrote? I said that by the age of 22, I would have won a Grammy. A Grammy? I didn't even know what a Grammy was. Like, my dumbass didn't even know that Grammys were for singers. So the kid I had a crush on actually pipes up and says, don't you mean an Oscar? Grammys are for singers. And I said, no, I mean a Grammy. I had the audacity to try and correct the kid.